Imagine a future where the mind remains as vibrant and expansive as a well-tended garden, growing richer rather than withering with the passing of years. A prevailing myth suggests that reaching the age of 70 inevitably signals a steep cognitive decline, treating memory loss as a tax one must pay for longevity. This fatalistic view ignores the profound capacity of the brain to adapt, rewire, and strengthen its neural pathways when approached with the right quality of attention. By shifting focus from the anxiety of forgetting to the practice of deep, non-judgmental awareness, it becomes possible to unlock a reservoir of mental clarity that has been accessible all along. This journey reveals that a steady memory is not a matter of force or genetic luck, but the result of cultivating a specific relationship with the present moment. The biological foundation of mindful awareness, the human brain, possesses an extraordinary ability to reshape itself throughout the entire lifespan, a phenomenon known as neuroplasticity that remains active well into the 8th, 9th, and 10th decades of life. Conventional wisdom often overlooks the fact that what is frequently labeled as memory failure is actually a failure of encoding caused by chronic distraction and low-level stress. When an individual operates in a constant state of doing, rushing from one task to the next without true presence, the hippocampus is flooded with stress hormones like cortisol, which actively inhibit the formation of new neural connections. The approach championed by Kabat-Zinn suggests that by intentionally bringing awareness to the here and now, one reduces this chemical barrage and creates the optimal biological environment for the brain to function. This shift does not require hours of rigid meditation, but rather a gentle reorienting of how one inhabits their daily existence. It is entirely natural for a person to feel a pang of frustration when a name or a detail slips away, and this reaction often triggers a cycle of anxiety that further clouds the mind. The mechanism behind this restoration of clarity lies in the regulation of the autonomic nervous system, specifically the balance between the sympathetic and parasympathetic branches. When the mind is constantly projected into the future, worrying about potential decline or upcoming obligations, the sympathetic nervous system keeps the body in a state of low-grade fight or flight. This state prioritizes survival reflexes over the subtle, energy-intensive processes required for consolidating long-term memories. By engaging in mindfulness-based practices, the individual activates the parasympathetic nervous system, often called the rest and digest mode, which signals to the brain that it is safe to allocate resources toward repair and growth. This physiological shift is measurable and profound, resulting in a thickening of the cerebral cortex in areas associated with attention and sensory processing. A common scenario illustrates this dynamic in the life of a senior who walks into a room and suddenly forgets the purpose of the journey. In a state of distraction, the mind was likely churning over a conversation from breakfast or a news headline, leaving the intention to fetch a book or a glass of water unanchored in the brain's short-term storage. If that same individual pauses, takes a conscious breath, and moves with deliberate awareness before entering the room, the intention is held firmly in the forefront of consciousness. The simple act of noticing the sensation of feet on the floor or the rhythm of breath serves as a scaffold for the memory, transforming a moment of confusion into an exercise in presence. This practical application of mindfulness turns mundane transitions into opportunities for cognitive reinforcement. However, it is important to acknowledge that this approach does not magically erase the biological realities of aging or cure organic neurodegenerative diseases. There will be moments when processing speed slows down or when a specific word remains stubbornly on the tip of the tongue, regardless of how mindful one remains. The critical distinction lies in how the individual relates to these occurrences. Reacting with self-criticism creates a secondary layer of stress that impairs function, whereas meeting the moment with acceptance allows the brain to recover its equilibrium. The goal is not to achieve the rapid-fire recall of a 20-year-old, but to cultivate a reliable, spacious form of memory that serves the wisdom of the elder years. The relationship between sensory input and memory formation is another crucial aspect that strengthens when one slows down to truly perceive the environment. Memories are not stored as abstract data files, but are woven together from sights, sounds, textures, and emotional resonance. When a person rushes through a meal or a conversation, the sensory details are blurred, providing the brain with fewer hooks to retrieve the experience later. By fully attending to the taste of food, the warmth of the sun, or the specific tone of a loved one's voice, the individual creates a multi-sensory imprint that is far more durable and easier to access. This depth of processing turns the ordinary moments of the day into a rich tapestry of recallable events. Furthermore, the practice of non-judgmental observation helps to declutter the mind of the mental noise that often interferes with retrieval. Much of what is perceived as forgetfulness is actually an overcrowding of the working memory with repetitive thoughts and judgments about oneself or others. When the perspective shifts to observing these thoughts without getting entangled in them, working memory is freed up to handle the task at hand. This clearance allows the executive functions of the brain to organize information more efficiently, making it available when needed. It is a process of mental hygiene that becomes increasingly vital as the sheer volume of life experience accumulates over 7 decades. The cultivation of this steady awareness acts as a buffer against the isolation that often exacerbates cognitive decline in older adults. When one is truly present with others, listening deeply rather than planning a response, the social interaction becomes more meaningful and cognitively stimulating. These rich social connections are known to be protective factors for brain health, stimulating the release of neurotransmitters that support neuronal survival. Thus, the internal practice of mindfulness naturally extends outward, fostering a supportive environment that nourishes the mind. The path to a strong memory is not a solitary struggle against the clock, but an opening into a more connected and vivid way of being. What creates the noise that blocks my clarity right now? Anchoring attention in a distracted world, the modern world, is designed to fracture attention, a challenge that becomes particularly acute for the aging brain, which naturally filters out distractions less efficiently than it did in youth. A pervasive cultural habit is the glorification of multitasking, which is frequently mistaken for efficiency, but is, in reality, a primary antagonist to memory retention. The perspective offered by mindfulness-based stress reduction emphasizes that the mind can only truly attend to one thing at a time. When an individual attempts to juggle multiple streams of information, watching the news while searching for keys and talking on the phone, the brain fails to encode any of these events deeply. The antidote lies in the deliberate practice of single tasking, treating each action as a complete event worthy of full engagement. One might observe that the mind wanders precisely when it needs to focus, revealing a habit of disengagement that has been reinforced over decades. At a neurological level, the process of switching attention rapidly between tasks depletes glucose in the brain and increases the production of stress hormones, creating a state of mental exhaustion that mimics cognitive decline. The hippocampus requires a certain duration of uninterrupted focus to transfer information from temporary working memory into long-term storage. When this process is constantly interrupted by shifting gaze or a wandering mind, the neural trace is weak and easily overwritten by the next stimulus. By consciously choosing to do one thing at a time, the individual provides the brain with the stability it needs to etch deep, durable grooves of memory. This is not about slowing down to a snail's pace, but about matching the speed of action to the speed of awareness. Consider the daily routine of managing medication, a source of anxiety for many seniors who fear missing a dose or double dosing. A common error occurs when the action becomes automatic, performed while the mind is already thinking about the next activity, leading to a later uncertainty about whether the pill was actually swallowed. A mindful approach transforms this routine into a ritual. The individual feels the cool glass of water, hears the sound of the cap twisting, and consciously registers the sensation of swallowing. By anchoring the action in immediate physical sensation, the brain creates a distinct episodic memory that can be easily verified later. This simple shift from automaticity to awareness eliminates the doubt that often plagues daily life. It is necessary to recognize that the environment itself often conspires against this type of singular focus, with constant notifications, background noise, and interruptions. There are times when external chaos is unavoidable, and the brain will struggle to hold onto information despite the best intentions. In these instances, the practice involves acknowledging the difficulty without self-judgment and using external aids like notes or alarms not as crutches, but as respectful supports for a busy mind. Relying on a calendar or a notebook is not a sign of failure. It is a strategic management of cognitive load that allows the mind to remain relaxed and present for what truly matters. The concept of beginner's mind, central to Kabat-Zinn's teachings, offers a powerful tool for refreshing the attention and combating the autopilot mode that dulls memory. As people age, the familiarity of routine can lead to a state where the brain stops paying close attention because it assumes it knows what is happening. By approaching a familiar street, a spouse's face, or a garden path as if seeing it for the first time, the brain is forced to wake up and process new details. This renewed curiosity triggers the release of dopamine and norepinephrine, neurotransmitters that signal the importance of the event and enhance memory consolidation. It turns the mundane into the novel, keeping the neural machinery sharp and agile. Deepening this practice reveals that attention is like a muscle that can be strengthened through repetition, regardless of age. Every time the mind wanders and is gently brought back to the breath or the task at hand, the neural circuits for executive control are reinforced. This is the heavy lifting of mental fitness, performed not in a gym, but in the quiet moments of sitting in a chair or washing dishes. Over time, the latency between distraction and the return to focus decreases, resulting in a continuous, steady beam of attention that illuminates whatever it touches. This steadiness is the bedrock of a reliable memory. The emotional quality of attention also plays a significant role. Attention driven by anxiety is narrow and brittle, while attention driven by interest is broad and receptive. When a person tries to remember something out of fear of forgetting, the brain constricts, making access to information more difficult. Conversely, when the motivation is a genuine desire to connect or understand, the brain remains open and flexible. Cultivating a sense of wonder and appreciation for the world creates an emotional context that supports the natural function of memory. It shifts the internal narrative from "I must remember this" or else to "I am fully here for this experience." Ultimately, the anchor of attention provides a sense of security in a life that can feel increasingly complex. Knowing that one has the tools to return to the present moment provides a refuge from the storm of scattered thoughts. This reliability builds confidence, which in turn reduces the stress that inhibits memory, creating a virtuous cycle of clarity. The capacity to attend is the capacity to live fully, ensuring that the years over 70 are not a blur of forgotten days, but a collection of vividly experienced moments. Where's my attention drifting to right now? The role of emotional resonance and acceptance memory is not merely a cold catalog of facts. It is deeply intertwined with the emotional landscape of the individual. The amygdala, the brain's emotional center, sits adjacent to the hippocampus and acts as a highlighter pen, marking certain experiences as significant and worthy of long-term storage. In the later decades of life, the accumulation of emotional experiences can be a source of great wisdom. Yet unresolved stress or emotional avoidance can clutter the mind and impede cognitive function. The mindfulness perspective encourages a turning toward difficult emotions rather than a turning away, allowing them to be processed and integrated. When an individual suppresses emotion, a significant amount of cognitive energy is consumed in the effort of repression, leaving less fuel available for the encoding of new memories. The biological mechanism at play involves the modulation of the stress response. Chronic emotional suppression keeps the body in a state of vigilance that is toxic to the hippocampus. By acknowledging feelings of sadness, fear, or frustration with a non-judgmental attitude, the intensity of the physiological arousal is reduced. This emotional regulation lowers the levels of circulating glucocorticoids, thereby protecting the delicate neural structures responsible for memory. It is a paradox that by allowing oneself to feel the discomfort of aging or loss, one actually preserves the mental faculties needed to navigate them. The clear seeing of one's internal state prevents the emotional backlog that often manifests as brain fog. Consider a conversation with a grandchild or a close friend where the topic touches on sensitive or painful subjects. If the listener is busy internally defending against the emotions arising, they will miss the nuance of what is being shared and likely forget the details of the exchange. However, if the listener remains open and allows the emotions to resonate without clinging to them, the conversation is imprinted with a rich emotional tag. Later, the recall of that memory is facilitated by the emotional signature it carries. The memory becomes a living part of the relationship, easily accessible because it was received with a full, open heart. There is, however, a necessary distinction to be made between healthy emotional processing and rumination. Rumination involves circling the same negative thoughts repeatedly, which reinforces neural pathways of distress and actively interferes with new learning. The approach of mindfulness offers a way to step out of these repetitive loops by grounding awareness in the physical body. When a mind starts to spin a story of regret or worry, shifting attention to the sensation of breath or the feeling of gravity breaks the cycle. This interruption prevents the consolidation of negative biases and keeps the working memory clear for the present reality. The acceptance of the present moment, exactly as it is, liberates the mind from the exhausting task of wishing things were different. Many seniors expend vast amounts of energy comparing their current cognitive abilities to those of their younger selves, a comparison that inevitably leads to a sense of deficit. This constant self-evaluation acts as a background noise that degrades the quality of attention available for the task at hand. By accepting that the mind functions differently at 70 than at 30, perhaps slower but capable of greater synthesis, the individual can work with their current machinery rather than against it. This acceptance relaxes the mental tension that blocks recall. Furthermore, the practice of gratitude and savoring the positive aspects of life enhances the retention of beneficial memories. The brain has a natural negativity bias, evolved for survival, which makes it stickier for unpleasant events. Deliberately taking time to absorb a moment of beauty, a kindness received, or a physical comfort helps to counterbalance this bias. It essentially trains the brain to scan for and retain the good, building a library of positive memories that supports emotional resilience. This is not about toxic positivity, but about a realistic appreciation of the nourishment available in the present. The clarity that comes from emotional balance allows for a different kind of memory to emerge, one that is less about rote facts and more about the essence of experiences. This gist memory is often preserved and even strengthened in older age, allowing elders to extract the moral or the lesson from a complex situation efficiently. By clearing the emotional static, the aging brain becomes adept at seeing patterns and connections that younger brains might miss. This is the transition from intelligence to wisdom, supported by a memory that prioritizes meaning over minutiae. Finally, this emotional clarity fosters a sense of agency and dignity. Instead of feeling like a victim of an aging brain, the individual becomes an active participant in their cognitive health through the management of their internal climate. The fear of memory loss loses its paralyzing power when one realizes that the quality of one's presence is the primary determinant of memory function. The steady memory is a byproduct of a steady heart and a settled mind, achievable through the gentle, persistent practice of returning to the now. What feeling am I avoiding that needs to be felt? Integrating wisdom and continuity, the journey toward a strong, steady memory after 70 is ultimately a process of integrating the fragmented parts of oneself into a cohesive whole. It is a move away from the frantic accumulation of information toward a more curatorial approach to life experience. The insights of John Kabat-Zinn remind us that the richness of life is found only in the present moment, and memory is simply the trail left behind by fully lived moments. By relinquishing the struggle against the natural tempo of aging and embracing a mindful engagement with the world, the brain is given the permission and the resources it needs to thrive. This is not a battle to reclaim the past, but a strategy to fully inhabit the present, which naturally results in a clearer, more dependable record of one's life. The synthesis of these principles reveals that the strength of memory is deeply dependent on the reduction of unnecessary mental load. When a brain is no longer taxed by the constant hum of multitasking, the corrosive effects of chronic stress, or the weight of unresolved emotion, its innate capacity for retention shines through. The physiological benefits: lower cortisol, increased neurotrophic factors, and improved neural connectivity are the biological dividends of a life lived with intention. This integration creates a cognitive environment where the mind is distinct, calm, and ready to receive. It is a shift from a scarcity mindset, fearing what is lost, to an abundance mindset, valuing the depth of what is retained. A practical realization of this integration is seen in the senior who no longer apologizes for taking their time. In a culture that worships speed, the deliberate slowing down becomes an act of rebellion and self-preservation. Whether it is reading a book, engaging in a hobby, or simply walking in nature, the refusal to rush ensures that the neural networks are fully activated and that the experience is deeply encoded. This pace allows for the retrieval of wisdom, the ability to connect a current event with a lifetime of learning, which is the true superpower of the elder brain. The continuity of self is maintained not by remembering every phone number, but by maintaining a coherent narrative of one's life through presence. It is crucial to understand that this path is accessible to everyone, regardless of their starting point or previous experience with meditation. The brain remains responsive to changes in behavior and attitude until the very end of life. Every moment of conscious awareness is a vote for neural health, a small but significant investment in the longevity of the mind. There is no deadline for beginning this practice. The very next breath offers a fresh opportunity to reset the nervous system and sharpen the lens of attention. The barrier is not ability, but the belief that it is too late or too difficult to change. As the frantic noise of the world falls away, what remains is a mind that is spacious, resilient, and surprisingly capable. The fear of the future is replaced by a confidence in one's ability to handle the present. Memory becomes less of a test to be passed and more of a companion to be cherished. The realization dawns that the mind was never broken, only distracted, and that the return to wholeness is as simple and as profound as coming back to one's senses. In this space of clear seeing, the years over 70 become a time of immense cognitive and spiritual potential. What truth about my own value do I need to remember today?